Okay, here we are in nature, and we are here together, yay, to answer some dragon questions. Well, not really dragons alone, but I got a real, well, first of all, I have a visitor, yay, it is Ryan. You have seen him in the podcast, and if you have not, then definitely go and check out my podcast episode number 7, where we talk about a whole bunch of stuff. And so he's visiting us right now, and I got a really good question this morning, and I felt that I needed to record a video. And so we're doing this together today. Anything you?
Sounds about right.
So the question, I'm just gonna read it, is: were there any negative polarized dragons? Maybe if the dragon rider was negatively polarized, the dragon was too. Were there any dark dragon knighthoods? Because in many esoteric teachings, people call Aruman the dragon, and many European royal houses had, how do you pronounce this?
I don't know. Wyverns?
Yeah, and dragons as their logo. And now I'm aware this could point to the alpha draconians who look like humanoid reptilian dragons, but I'm wondering about the elemental earth dragons. Now this is a very good question that basically is multiple questions in one, and there are a bunch of different little answers that we could give to separate paragraphs of this question. This is basically a whole chapter of esoteric teachings that we can get into just this question alone. Like the negatively polarized dragons, and if the dragon rider was negatively polarized, there's two different things. First, I want to say, if they were actually working with dragons, and if you've checked out my free dragon lessons on YouTube, I talk a little bit about how that works. The dragon is very telepathic, so when you are working with a dragon, they can sense your emotional state of mind right away. If you're trying to mislead or deceive the dragon, they will know right away. Of course, there are instances where this has happened, where there have been attempts to manipulate dragons. From dragon riders that started out with very good intentions, but then got influenced by negative beings, people, and there were attempts to manipulate their dragon, but this usually did not end well for their connection and for the person, because a dragon is always connected through the heart, straight to God, straight to source, and they can feel when their rider is not doing the same thing, and then there is a disharmony, and there is an alchemical merge that takes place between dragon and rider. And when you insert this manipulation and attempt to basically corrupt this connection, then this merge basically separates, and they can no longer work together. And I've seen instances where in the past this connection was then broken and they could simply no longer work together. But there are definitely also dragons but I would not really call them dragons anymore. They are dragon-like beings that were created to do negative things. And I think that now you can take over.
Okay. So I see dragons from two different states: the consciousness form of dragons and then the physical form that the dragons manifest in. And so when it comes to the elements and the elemental dragons, the wheel of the elements is the wheel of time that we descend down into time in. And so the structure of that looks like a dragon itself. It's a snake, a serpent looking. It's the wheel of time. And so this is where we get the original dragon timekeepers, which were located in many different planets. But the big place why I'm talking about this now for the negative is in the Draconian constellation, because the dragon consciousness is the consciousness that's manifesting our reality. So then that consciousness combines and it creates races, it creates different pockets of other consciousness to experience itself in form. So the parasitic negative polarization of the dragons comes through both of those forms. And so the way that I see it happening was first it connected into the consciousness of the dragon itself. So there was some form of parasitic energy that came in through the consciousness of the dragon timekeepers. So you can then already imagine that dragon consciousness that's invading as a dragon itself. So it's the large oversoul self of the negative dragon beings. And so then the organic lines that hold dragon, reptilian, lizard within the organic genes, that consciousness then got to which lines were closest to those dragon timekeepers. So this is different than what she's talking about, because she's talking about the dragon riders and the relationship with the dragon, to whereas the reason why that happens is because there's been an parasitic invasion through the elemental wheel. So that means that these dragon consciousnesses and the forms can then be genetically manipulated and hybridized. And so from that point, that's where I see these beings starting to create races of these fallen dragon consciousnesses and fallen dragon forms into what we're seeing today, into these entire kind of like service to self, negatively polarized factions. And so within that, they have different tools, but like she's saying, discernment of the dragon is the superpower of the dragon. And so they can take the consciousness of an organic polarized dragon and hybridize that into a negative dragon. So then when you interact with that, the false light matrix of the organic consciousness they took is creating a screen that's pushing all of the information you want to see, that you want to connect with. That is true a lot of times, that you're connecting into with other soul agreements and other soul contracts. But they use that false light screen to then present the organic consciousness and try to deceive the discernment within the dragon that may be perceiving the experience. And so the fall happened from these higher states where we were living in forests in Avalon when working with dragons, and the split within the elemental wheel of consciousness is what then created the polarization into using the negative for a specific agenda.
Yeah, and in Avalon specifically is where the split, where I've seen that the split is really starting to happen, and that certain people were simply more susceptible to this, I guess, negative infiltration, let's call it that. And because they were feeling that they were starting to be separated from source energy, they were, and this is also part of just this contrast growing, means that some people were able to really hold that source anchor, like anchor in source energy, and other people were having more difficulty with that. And in a way, yes, that was orchestrated, like when you look at the bigger picture of things, but that means that this contrast is going to exist in everything that you see. And you can see it now in like Game of Thrones is an example of how these dragons were these very sacred beings that needed to be treated with respect. And then there are the White Walkers, and they create basically their own version of this White Walker dragon that is the complete opposite. So we see this coming back in modern TV shows and movies, but you see it in everything. You can see there's almost, of everything that exists, there's like an evil twin version almost. But yeah, we could definitely go into a whole bunch of topics.
That is basically the evil twin. You can think of the time matrix, the yin and yang, and there being in a polarity field, solar light and lunar light. The darker light is the lunar light. So that's where this negative consciousness has come through. So that's why it's associated with all of these lunar beings. And so you do actually have, from a perception of yin and yang, you have a positively polarized time matrix attempting to ascend, and then you have a negatively polarized time matrix attempting to keep people down and attempting to ascend in a very distorted way.
Mm-hmm. And that is why you may initially feel like you resonate with some of these beings or energies that you encounter, because they are copies in a way, but like there's a facade of what the actual positive thing is, and that is how it presents itself. And that is what you are initially attracted to. For instance, dragons, but it can be just in general. It could be you watching YouTube and scrolling and watching a bunch of different videos of people talking about spirituality. And a lot of these people will initially feel very positive, very good. And after a while, you may start to feel that there's something else going on if you are in tune with your own intuition. And you may start to feel, okay, initially, why did I feel so drawn to this person's teachings, and now you feel repelled? It is because you have broken through this mask, basically this facade. And I was going to say something completely different. The dragons, why are they also portrayed? This person asked me, in Asia you see how they are very positive beings. They are symbols of abundance, good luck. To see a dragon was a very good thing, but then they became demonized in the West, and I do talk about that a little bit in my Dragon Codes story and my course. And basically a lot has to do with Christianity, and specifically Roman Catholicism, and how they inverted the whole story. They basically applied this technique that he just explained to the dragon, and that's what they started doing. And then, because in many esoteric teachings people call Ahriman the
Ahriman.
dragon. Yes, I'm gonna leave that to you.
Oh, Ahriman. So Ahriman, it's spelled Ahriman, and you may have heard it in the term the Ahrimanic deception. And so this was coined, majorly coined through Rudolf Steiner and his teachings. But it's again this yin yang. It's talking about Ahriman being this darker lunar shadow that is trying to deceive others through that process that we're talking about. And so there can even be deception within the hijacking of like the positive frame of dragons, because you can then get people to depend and almost create a pedestal and create like a sacrificial hierarchy for working with these dragons in any form. So there's still the ability for them to infiltrate those experiences because they're hiding behind that false screen of light. So with Ahriman, you have to use Ahriman against itself, meaning use time against itself. So trust time and not try to sniff this stuff out and then just avoid it in your life, because you need to go through experiences where you're interacting with these things and you're utilizing your discernment to turn on that superpower of the dragon discernment. And so over time, that false screen is going to be broken down, and you're then going to see through a different vibration. And so I can't remember where I was going to go with after that, but Ahriman specifically is the function of the time matrix, and time attempting to do two different things, because we're in an artificial consciousness and an organic consciousness. And so this is where we then even get the hybridized forms of dragons that currently exist in our earth. You know, we have positive dragons in our earth, but there's also negative dragons in these underground areas where these negative factions are using them. So they create a form of the consciousness of Ahriman. So there's an actual dragon that they're then feeding things to perpetuate a hierarchy. So the discernment within your time frame is the most important thing, and just trusting in the unfolding of time and your devotion to the organic polarization, because you have to go through these experiences to really feel the depth of your discernment and how these tricks catch us in our blind spots.
And definitely speaking about time, we have been, okay, if you look at time in a linear way, we are experiencing it here on Earth in a very linear way. And if you look at the history of Earth, how long we have been programmed with a specific mindset, especially in the West, of dragons being evil, dragons being dangerous, slaying the dragon. And this is some stuff that I also talk about. This is something that is so embedded in humanities, the Western person, like people living in Europe, the US, Australia. I don't know how African mythology sees dragons. I don't know enough about that. Of course, in the East, the dragon is seen as a positive being. I just said that already. But that goes back to reading stories as a child about knights slaying dragons. The dragon is rarely seen as a positive being. So even when you have a positive encounter with a dragon being, you may still be skeptical because of this programming that you have received. And then there is your soul that is saying, but I remember dragons essentially being celestial beings, creator beings connected to Mother, Father, God. And that is the original state of the dragon. And then there is all this programming on top. And just like with any other programming, it comes down to what he just said. The more that you tune into what you know to be true and are devoted to connecting to Source, to God, and ask, show me the truth of this situation, whether that is somebody in your life, whether that is about the dragons and working with dragons. And people sometimes say, okay, I'm meditating and this dragon presented itself to me, but I did not know how to react. That is a question that I get at least once or twice a week. This dragon came into my meditation and I felt overwhelmed. It's also because this dragon energy is extremely powerful, because it does not play small. Like, we have been programmed to play small, to be invisible. And this dragon is this part of us that is just magnificent. It is one with Source, and it says, I have no reason to make myself smaller. This is what I'm showing you, is what the dragon often comes to show you. And it comes into your life when you are ready to embrace that role. But then, of course, the negative factions, negatively polarized beings, all throughout history, galactic history, do not want you. They don't benefit from you knowing how magnificent you are, that you are as powerful as this dragon that is one with Source energy, that you are one with Source. So they benefit from doing the opposite. And what better way to do that by to take exactly that structure, the dragon, and turn it into an inverted version of what it was supposed to be, to completely confuse you and slow down, or attempt to slow down this ascension process, which cannot be slowed down. Like, we are at a point where it simply cannot be slowed down, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
absolutely. And the how do I word this? What she's saying, it's basically the consciousness of the dragon of time, the negative consciousness, making us scared of ourselves, because it knows that we originated from celestial dragons. We're not talking about draconians and the physical forms, celestial, etheric, cosmic, multidimensional dragons. So that idea is at the core, at the root of our identity as an omnipresent being that is unified with itself. And so that Ahrimanic deception is creating fear towards the dragon, because if you think of it as there were positively polarized, really big, large dragons, and then the humans, the draconians, the smaller races, some of them started to put fear towards the dragons. And so that's where they then started hunting them down, started taking their genes, and started flipping them into these inverted versions. And so that fear itself is the fear that shows up for your body in your protection of your space and around your time. Because if you fear time, that is what the negative beings call, it's the all-consuming field. And so it presents us in this kind of death paradox. But that dragon consciousness, the Ahrimanic deception, is keeping us limited in that ascension of vibrational process, because we know that death is not what it is. It's an idea that's taken on an identity. And so really anchoring into your relationship with time itself, and not just in this body, in this life, but your complete and entire relationship with time, is what then allows you to maneuver that positively polarized time matrix back into your body.
And that is why whenever I talk about Akashic Records, I almost always begin, whether it's a private reading or a video, I begin with linear time does not really exist. And I don't mean ignore linear time, because we are definitely experiencing time as being linear, with there being a past, present, future. But once you go above the third dimension and you can really view yourself as this little person that's flying, and you can see all of a sudden there's the past, this is now, this is in 10 years, and I can see all these things happening right now. Then if you expand it out even further, you can see what happened before I was born. There's all these other, it's like a spider web, and all these threads are connected, and in the middle is the core of the spider web. It's your higher self, and it's creating this web of experiences. And if one thread moves, the whole web is going to move. And I know that now we're kind of on another topic, but not really. It's all connected, because then you can really see how you can time travel. You can become the master of time by seeing that you can actually go back in time. You can go to the future, because it's all frequency. It's all about frequency and tuning into different parts of your soul that exists, that is made up out of all these different frequencies, which are experiences that you are having simultaneously. So yeah.
And the motion that takes you from point A to point B to C, that is itself the dragon. That is the articulation of time. Time is motion. If there wasn't motion, we'd be stuck like a rock. And so that's the illusion. And so working with that aspect of time is what continues to bring you into the space of being in your dragon consciousness, because the dimensions 1, 2, and 3, those are below the dimension of passing, of death, because death is the transition through the fourth dimension, which itself is a manifestation of the core time matrix. It's the bridge. So the death consciousness wants to keep us here at 4 and not allow us to move up. And so that's the Ahrimanic dragon in the bottom spiral, continuing. It's the gravitational pull that shame and negative polarization creates, that creates a pull, a consumption within its field.
And when you have this spiral and it goes like this, when you stretch it out, because that's how I always see this dragon energy, it's like a beam of light that connects all dimensions. It goes all the way up to source, and simultaneously is like a beam that is connected all the way to the lowest dimensions, and it's experiencing all these things, opening up to all of these things simultaneously. That is why when inviting in the dragons and asking them, show me what it is that I need to see, your life may blow up, kind of, because you are really inviting them in to show you the multidimensionality of your soul. And you may be experiencing something that, and its origin is somewhere completely different. It's because this dragon is connecting all the dots for you. And when you look at this Ahrimanic dragon being that he was talking about, it's going like this, because it wants you to keep going in circles. It does not want you to go up. When you stretch out this spiral, what do you get? You basically get the serpent that goes up like the Kundalini. That is what you get.
And that's the motion and the movement. Because if you think of memory has to do with motion. Memory is in motion. There's words in motion, your body's in motion. So when you're working with the time matrix within your body, you're healing your trauma, which is dealing with the artificial polarization that we've inherited. Then you're turning on dragon tails and dragon scales, where you're able to perceive back through time as a dragon itself. And it is the tail of your consciousness is the tail of that spiral staircase that is moving up. And so this is all about recognizing yourself as the dragon and remembering that you hold the power of this discernment, and that as long as you hold this discernment, nothing can touch you.
And we can definitely keep going and going
Yeah.
about this topic, because if you would go all the way back to the beginning, and I wrote about this, the way that I saw it is the seraphim, the golden dragons, as I call them, that's how they present themselves to me, golden serpent beings of God, celestial dragons. They are the original creator beings. But then contrast needed to be introduced, and down the line the human form was introduced. And that's how you have these stories of the elven humanoid beings and Lyran beings. And I talked about it a little bit in the course, but way more has been coming through about that and unpacking for me the past couple of months on how these bloodlines were then working with the dragons, because they were essentially one. They are the same creature. They just decided to split off into two different manifestations so that they could work together and become this upwards spiral, basically. And yeah, I could go on and on about this.
We're at what, 26? I
Yeah.
feel like that's pretty good for this first section. We're
But-
gonna make this a normal themed conversation, right? That's
Yeah,
what we're gonna do?
and we
All right.
can like do a series.
Yeah.
And if anyone has any questions, of course, put them in the comments, and
Please.
then we can keep building on that.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds good.
Don't let Ahriman deceive you.
No.
Stop deceiving yourself. Be
Okay.
in love. And the darkness only has a hold over you if it convinces you it does.
Okay.